We are live. Hello, everyone. Sorry for my voice today. It's not the best, but we're soldiering on. Kevin Allen's with us today, which is great. We're going to be previewing St. Louis and Tampa in a second, but I have to go. My dog is going crazy upstairs, so I'll be right back. And I'm going to make sure everything's okay because I'm by myself in the house. So hold on a second.
We can fill for a minute with baseball because I'm intrigued by the upcoming playoffs, mostly in the American League. I'm a Yankees fan, and I think they have a good chance of beating Minnesota in the wild card, but it's a one-game playoff. But Cleveland, Houston, Boston, it's going to be real tough to get through the American League.
I'm actually more intrigued by baseball playoffs than I usually am, and a lot of it is, Verlander. I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, and Verlander was shipped to the Astros, and J.D. Martinez, of course, is tearing it up for the Diamondbacks. Like, what an incredible run he's had since he was dealt, and it's really been fun watching, and boy, did the Major League Baseball, and I'm going to use the word stumble, but obviously it was calculated into what a great find on that wild card. I mean, it is such a flip of the coin, but it is such an exciting situation, one game. And I really disagree with people who say that, it shouldn't be like that because you play 162 games and it comes down to just one game. But you know what? Before that occurred, sometimes it did anyway because it would come down to the final game of the season. So how is it any different to sort of set it up and, get it nationally televised and create more excitement and revenue? It's just the same thing as it was before. We just call it a playoff game, and it's the game 163 instead of game 162.
It's fans wanting their team to stay in it longer. That's all. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Like, I saw the Mets lose the one-game playoff, and it could be a little painful, and you feel like, oh, that's it. They spend so much energy to get there. But yeah, I agree with you. It's good for the game. The team, I think, the team to beat, I picked preseason is Houston. That was pre-Verlander. Now with Verlander, I think they're the team. I will be shocked if Houston loses. I think Mike's right. I think the Yankees will get by the Twins, and that'll be as far as the Yankees get.
Yeah, well, and I want to sort of shift this in the hockey direction because, Kevin, I remember – around the time of the lockout when they were negotiating the CBA that there was some talk of them expanding the playoffs from say 16 to potentially 20 with a type of play-in game, and with the league probably going in the direction of 32 teams, to me that doesn't sound outlandish anymore. I think they should have some sort of play-in game like baseball does with the wild card, and I think that would add an entirely new level of excitement.
Oh, I think it eventually will happen because, at some point you just sort of run out of ancillary revenue streams, and that would create, a pretty big one because, that's not covered under the NBC television agreement. So, you could sell that to ESPN, you could sell it to, Lifetime, you could sell it to anybody you wanted to sell it, or just have it on NHL Network and sell all the advertising, but it would create a new revenue stream. And my argument for that is the same as for baseball. Like, people argue, well, it shouldn't come down to one game after playing an 82-game season. Well, why not? Because the season comes down to one game. It's exactly the same thing, except it's game 83 instead of game 82. And if you don't want to get in that situation, then don't finish 15th or 16th. Make sure you're finished in the top 14 teams. Like, there's a way to avoid it is to play really well. And the penalty for barely eking in is you got to survive this incredibly flip of the coin game. But it's so much fun for fans. Like, I don't know how a fan can't see this as a tremendous thing. And does it add more luck to it when it's one game as opposed to seven? Well, of course. But you know what? The Super Bowl has luck involved in it as well. I mean, I get it that it's, one football game and that's the way it's always played. But, if you replay the Super Bowl, a week later, you'll have a completely different result. Luck always plays a role in sports. So anyway, I would favor that, especially as Mike mentioned, once you get up to 32 and maybe even more. I mean, if we believe they're going to fill out the Western dance card with Seattle at some point, well, you know what? Quebec is going to get in this league at some point.
Yeah, right.
see 33 teams. And, as much as people believe that at some point Arizona will just fold or Florida is going to go away, I mean, that's not really the NHL plan. They don't really want to see that happen. So we could easily see 33 teams at some point.
Yeah. I think, my opinion, and it's very unpopular, but I think you have to have 32 teams in the playoffs. And I honestly, and I know this is like one of the crazy things, but what you're saying, but I put it out there before, but I really always felt like that, you should have one place 32, but the difference being that, the 32nd team in a best of 7 series has to win 6 games as opposed to, having to win 4, some kind of thing like that, where the favorite has to win 2 games instead of winning 4. Like, put something out that's really interesting, get everybody in the playoffs, because you're right, this time of year is more exciting, but yet make the regular season more valuable by making it, so you can make your first round better, that kind of thing. I think
it's too crazy. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time.
It's too many teams for a pro league.
Yeah, but the odds would be like incredible. Like, let's say the top team would be, I don't know, just throw it out there, Chicago, and they would be playing, say, Vegas in the first round, and Vegas would have to win 6 of 7 or something like that, and all Chicago would have to do is win 2 in that series. I think that
I don't think we'll ever get to that, but I do think, I've heard some scenarios where, a team that is like, say you go through a 1 through 20 playoff structure, that the team that's first overall gets more than 4 home games in a best of 7, that it would be 5 or, something of that nature to give them more of an advantage.
Yeah, but I think the NHL has finally gotten away from that old joke. Everybody makes the playoffs, and with X system, everybody would make it.
So terrible when 16 to 20 teams made the playoffs. Was it really all that's terrible? I mean, really think about it. Do you remember? I remember there's 1 versus 16 teams, like the Oilers versus the Flyers that first year.
No, you weren't following the Norris division, Eck. I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings were making the playoffs when they were like 15 to 20 games under 500.
They were getting smoked out of the playoffs too. I mean, but I think it was still exciting. I still think as a fan, you liked it when your team was making the playoffs with those records.
And we're not talking about the Steve Yzerman Red Wings. We're talking about the Johnny Ogrodnik.
Oh, I know. I believe it. That's the Red Wings that I grew up with, because that was my dad's favorite team back then. So I know those Red Wings well.
Here's the problem with your scenario, Eck. The system we have now, really works. Like, everybody likes it. Like, why do we want to screw around with it? Like, I think if you tweak it a little bit, and just to add in a wild card, the format is still the same. Like, that's only going to be I've heard some people suggest the best 2 out of 3. I just don't think you could do that. But I think it's limited. One game knockout. It really wouldn't change the structure. Like, I don't think we could disagree that the playoff format we have now is the best in sports. Like, it's 4 rounds. It's a gauntlet. It's I don't know anyone.
The one thing I think that is broken, I do believe, is the 2 playing 3 part of it in each division. I think that is a little bit broken. But I still think it is the best we've ever had. I think that's 100% true, right? And I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean,
rivalries.
Yeah, the problem is that you do find people that get tired of seeing the same teams and so forth. And I do get that, but I don't know. To win the Stanley Cup, you really have to. It's been you're on a survival.
No, it's amazing, and I think Washington and Minnesota are the 2 teams that will complain the most about this, about playing the same teams all the time, because Washington, they each have these teams they can't seem to get by in their own divisions. That's been the issue. So,
and how do you get around that? By winning.
I know, and that's always been throughout history. I mean, the Calgary Flames, Winnipeg Jets, Edmonton Oilers, back when they were all 3 of them were good. They couldn't get past the Flames couldn't get past the Oilers, but eventually they did.
And the one nice thing about if they ended up doing like a play-in game, say 1 team in each division, a 4 versus 5 in each division, or however they do it. The season ends on a Sunday. The playoffs start Wednesday, Thursday. You could have double headers on Monday, double headers on Tuesday for the play-in games, and you'd start the playoffs on Wednesday. It would fit perfectly. It wouldn't extend the season at all. So I think eventually that you could go down that road.
Yeah. I want to bring up something before we get started on our topics today, because it always strikes me when I hang out with Mike and Russ. That's a good thing. So I was at the All-American Prospect game, and I went to lunch, and there was discussion a lot of different sporting things. And what I noticed is when like I love these kind of debates. Like, should there be an extra playoff thing? I think that's fun. To me, that's what sports are all about.
Exactly.
But what's happened in sports, and that I'm always reminded when I'm with Mike and Russ, that sort of left me behind. I'm still in the 2000s and the 1990s. Is I just can't rate every sporting experience as if it's good or bad. Like, when I'm with Mike and Russ, because they're so social media savvy, like everything they talk about, it's either good or it's bad, and there's a rating system. Like there's scorekeepers on every aspect of sports, and I just don't do that. And I was reminded of that yesterday, and I wanted to bring this up to you. I wrote a story about Mike Milbury. It's going to be the temporary replacement for Eddie Olczyk while Eddie recovers from cancer surgery and is involved in weeks of chemotherapy. And he's just as Mike Milbury described it, it's next man up at NBC, and he's filling in, and he's saying, basically, I'm just keeping the seat warm. So I wrote this story, and I was absolutely flabbergasted by so many people that just were just so had to put forth their opinion about how it was going to ruin the game. And here's my question to you guys: like, does it matter to you who the analyst is? Like, I just can't. Like, I guess I do my own analysis. Like, I don't really pay that much attention to what the guy is saying. Like, I'm just watching the game, and I'm just sort of paying attention to how I want to see it. And I was absolutely stunned by how many people who said their experience in watching the game is diminished by the analyst. And I guess that's Russ and Mike are so involved in social media and are in that sort of that new generation. Is that true for you guys? Like, is your experience diminished by who's calling the game or heightened?
I'll tell you this. When I watch, if I could learn something, that's great. But if somebody is just consistently bad or wrong, it can ruin it for me. Yeah. I'm not saying Mike Milbury is going to do that because I'm going to give him a fair chance. I haven't seen Mike Milbury in this position in a very long time. We're used to Mike Milbury being the heel in the studio, so that's why I think people are reacting. But it doesn't mean he's going to be a heel as an analyst, right? I mean, that's not really. It's a different position. So I'm going to give him a chance. But yes, could it ruin it for me? It could.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, because I think like a broadcaster, like, does have an impact on me. Because of the way he calls the game, the cage. I can't necessarily sometimes pick out who the defender moving up is on the play, and if there's a sharp broadcaster, and and the guy says poke check by Darren Helm or whatever, and I haven't picked that up quicker. I'm appreciative of that, or the lyrical style of certain broadcasters. But an analyst, I wonder how many times they actually have anything to say during the course of a game. Is it 30? Is it 25?
Yeah.
Well, all I can say is that when I'm watching a game and I hear a guy like Mike Emmerich, who I have a lot of respect for, and the gift of language that he has, it enhances my viewing performance. When there is somebody who is not as good or is to the point of annoying, I sort of tune them out because otherwise I can't concentrate on the game. I'm just listening to their inane commentary.
I can give you a guy like back in the day in the days of MSG when I felt like it was at its height. John Davidson added things and taught you things that maybe you would have missed. Yeah. And I was appreciative of that.
That's fair. John Davidson was like that. Yeah.
Ray Ferraro on TSN as an ex-player who can really explain the game and be colorful and be informative, I think is one of the best in between the benches.
Yeah.
I agree. I think Ray is amazing. Honestly, he's my favorite. I agree with you. I'm going to agree with you.
I guess I think a guy can heighten the experience for me. I just don't think he can diminish it. To me, I'm not bothered by if the guy doesn't say anything that I don't like. Like, it doesn't make the game less enjoyable for me.
I have a good little story about this about this. So, before PJ Stock was hired to work with, I guess it was. I don't know what it was. NBC.
Hockey Night in Canada.
No, this was the first job. The first time he ever did color was not for Hockey Night in Canada. It was for like the local, whether it was Sportsnet or Comcast. I'm trying to remember who it was that actually was NBC. Anyway, Peter used to write for Hockey Buzz, and he was coming to town, and he was given this assignment. And his agent had been trying to get him a job in broadcasting for a while. He's been retired. He was given this assignment to cover a Flyers Penguin game in town. He called me up at 2 p.m, and I met him at a restaurant about 4 because he needed to. I was like, I need to be filled in on the Flyers. I need to be filled in on what do you think I should say. He's like, I've never done this before. I'm really nervous. I have no idea when I should step in, when I shouldn't step in. So I sat and I had lunch with him at Chicken Pizza around the corner, and we talked about it at length. And I said kind of the same thing that you said. You're saying there, Kevin. I said I think that the analysts that I really notice are the ones that are taking something away from the game, because I think that if you just throw some stuff out there that is taking away from the game, people will be bothered by it. If you can add to the game in some way by what I think people like the most, and I told him this, and I think he did a pretty good job at doing this for a while, was bring little words or little knickknacks into the game that maybe fans don't know. Throw things in there that's something that they wouldn't, I said, and I told him that I thought the best at doing that was Bill Clement back in the day. Like Bill Clement was really incredible at doing that because Bill saw the whole game so perfectly. And when I had my show on Comcast, we had a Bill Clement section where he would sit down with a player, and we would isolate that player for the entire game, and Bill would sit down with the player and analyze everything that happened away from the puck. And it was amazing. I learned so much in that period of time, to the point where I had never seen before that, sometimes when the puck's going the other direction, a player will push one of his own players from behind with his stick and give him a head start.
Mm-hmm.
Push him ahead. I'd never seen that. Didn't know that existed at all. Here I am covering hockey, thinking I'm all that, And he pointed out 3 times when the player we were talking to at that time was Mike Richards on the Flyers, where Mike Richards did that. I think I can tell you that I really don't recognize the analysts most of the time because for some reason I do tune them out, and I think maybe that comes from watching so many live games that we sort of just tune things out. The 4 of us especially will see lots of live games, but I think the actual fan day to day, that really means a lot more to them.
Well, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I can see that. I think that's probably right. When you do this for a living, we tend to do our own analysis. We're so used to watching the game that we don't, sort of think about that. But I agree. Like Ray Ferraro is a guy, when he's doing a game, I do pick up things. I like his humor. When guys are funny, I think you do, kind of notice it.
I can give you a good example, too. One night when I was going crazy, I was watching a Mets-Phillies game, and this is a year ago, and the Mets were pitching Robert Gesellman, and he had a bad shoulder to the point where he couldn't swing the bat, but he could still pitch. So he got up in the game, and he never swung the bat. And the first go-around, the Phillies analyst was like, I don't understand it. I don't know why he's not swinging. And I was trying to tweet to them, and I noticed that the Phillies didn't have any way of tweeting to the television crew to let them know. Second time he gets up, they're like, at least drop a bunt. Like, I don't understand it. I'm trying to, frantically to say, this guy has an injured shoulder. He can't swing. And it really, that frustrated the heck out of me. And I'll tell you, it did ruin the broadcast. It did.
I know. I feel the same way. I texted Keith Jones during a Flyers broadcast because I knew something that was happening, something about one of the players that was playing that he obviously didn't know because he was saying things that whether he didn't know that. And it was something secretive about the player. It wasn't a big deal, but it was why he might not be doing something else. Well, I texted him that, and he said he really appreciated it. He said actually he gets so many texts during games it blows his mind.
The one nice thing about games, so if you're not at the game, if you're watching it on Game Center Live or the Center Ice package, is that a lot of the times they'll broadcast the home and away, and if you don't like the broadcast crew of the one, you can watch the other one and get commentary that you prefer. It's so I think that's good, but yeah, I mean Russ and Kevin, and to a lesser extent myself. And, you've been to a ton of games. I'm so used to watching games from the press box where there is no play-by-play that I sometimes will mute the play-by-play and just watch the game that way. And I'm sort of doing things in my own mind in terms of telling myself what's going on rather than listen to somebody else.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I agree.
Bill Clement gave me just a great advice. It was years and years ago. He would never remember this, but I was talking to him about, the fact that I was doing some television too. I would be guesting on some shows, and I noted that I had difficulty sort of adapting to the television format. I was more of a radio, voice where you can kind of go on for 45 seconds, and obviously you can't do that in television. And he basically said that television, what you do is you make a declarative statement, you offer an opinion, and then you backfill for 15 to 18 seconds. And that little piece of advice changed the way that I approach television, and that I always do that now. If I'm being interviewed, I remember Bill's words, and it really has helped me because you got to be tighter on television. There's just not enough time, so that's what you do. They ask you a question, and in radio or podcast here, we can ramble on. That's just what we can do. Can't do that on television. So
sure,
and we do.
I appreciated that.
Yeah. So one quick thing before we move on, I wanted to talk to Kevin about this really briefly. And then we're going to start the show. By the way, let's start the show. We'll do it.
Start it, yeah.
But all this is going to stay in. But you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is September 27th, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I'm Mike Lindsay. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast. I just said that. Okay, so people are gonna be so mad because people love me saying the same exact thing every time. It's so funny. I will get 20 emails now that I didn't say. This is the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. We come to you every Monday through Friday this time. All right. Anyway, I got into a debate with Jillian Fisher online, and I don't like to. We've been trying to ignore this political thing as much as possible on HockeyBuzz for a reason. Kevin, you wrote a really good story about the Penguins and the whole visiting the White House. The tweet I wrote was, I want HockeyBuzz to be an escape place, so I asked my writers not to be political. It's not always easy for these passionate people, so I thank them. But since November, politics feel like they're 24/7. Every soul has the right to an opinion. However, it can get exhausting. We need escapes. So to me, that's sports. Now, I wrote this, and Jillian took this as, so I'm bringing this up because I like Jillian a lot. She's a person I really admire, and she's definitely in the young generation of social media. And she said it sounded like I was discriminating in this statement that I made, and that me not making a statement about what was going on, or me not allowing my writers to talk about what's going on, was in some way me expressing an opinion about what's not going on, And I love the way you handled it, Kevin. I've been telling our writers, we put an email out to all of our writers that basically says, listen, if we want you to write about hockey because there's enough other places that are talking about this stuff, but we also realize that it could become a hockey story, and when it becomes a hockey story, we want you to cover it, but not put in there your own political opinions that this is that Trump's an idiot or whatever. We're trying to keep that away. We don't want any of that because that just starts wars within wars, and we don't. And I finally pinpointed it down to why I really feel this way, because a lot of people are coming at me for it. Why I really feel this way is I grew up in a family where my dad was in Vietnam, and he was a staunch Republican. He started in Vietnam, was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, retired after Gulf War I. My mom was at Woodstock, okay, staunch Democrat. My mom's family, radical conservatives, okay. My mom not, my dad's family, Democratic to a fault. So I grew up in a politically charged household. My dad was one of the people who flew Richard Nixon to China in he was on that plane with him. I have a plaque here. We would fight there would be fights all the time about politics in our house, all the time. But when the Flyers came on, we'd all sit down and watch it like nothing else mattered. And on any of those really vicious fights and all that stuff that really got ugly at times went away. I have a different view of than my father-in-law right now. We've gotten into fights, but we can sit down and watch the Eagles game. That's why I've set this up the way I've set it up, sort of. So, but I wanted Kevin's opinion on this because he's the writer I respect the most and has been my mentor since I started doing this. Do you think it's right to ask your writers to stick to hockey and only write it if it relates to them, and if they do write about it, not choose a side?
Well, at USA Today, first of all, let me tell you that they ask us not to get involved in politics to the point where our political opinions interfere or could be perceived to be interfering with the way we cover a story. In other words, they would like not for their writers not to march in protest marches on Washington, or not to make appearances on behalf of candidates and so forth. And I think for the most part, a lot of the writers, follow that. Not everybody does, but I think most do. The problem that we now have is it's almost impossible to avoid not getting involved in covering this story, because now inaction is a form of protest.
Right.
The Pittsburgh Steelers are a great example of that. They chose because, what did the Pittsburgh coach say is that, we had all sides covered in our dressing room. We had players who were apolitical, didn't want to be involved at all. We had players who wanted to kneel. We had players who felt strongly that that we need to stand and salute. We couldn't agree. So what they did was they didn't take a stand. They stayed in the dressing room, and they were heavily criticized, for that. And that's part of I think, a dilemma of being an athlete these days, that inaction, there's nothing you can do. The Pittsburgh Penguins were in a can't win situation. Whatever they did was going to cause problems. If they had said, okay, we've changed our mind, we're not going to go to the White House, there would have been a storm of criticism. And there was a storm of criticism that they were going to go from people. I read my buddy Mark Spector's piece or his tweet anyway, where he was critical of them not taking a stand. And I guarantee you, if Joel Ward on Thursday night takes a knee, within the hockey world the next day, we're all going to ask all the top players what they thought about it.
Right.
Well,
it cannot be avoided.
Well, I mean, Austin Matthews was asked a couple days ago about the situation because he's American, and he came out, and apparently PK Subban came out today, said he would never kneel, never do anything like that. He would always stand for the national anthem because in terms of Matthews' family, I believe he had members of his family who were in the armed services. Ron Hainsey let the media know yesterday or a couple days ago that he was not going to answer any questions regarding the situation. It was just he didn't want to go there.
Right.
And he was asked this morning whether he would go to the White House with the Penguins because he was a member of the Stanley Cup winning team. And he just said, next question. He doesn't want to address it. And, and I don't, honestly, I don't blame him if you don't feel strongly about it or if you don't want your personal feelings to express them. They have the right to not do that. So, I mean, it's a very delicate issue in terms of,
my argument with that is, though, Mike, he is a public figure. And guess what? By the time the team is ready to go to the White House, you're going to know exactly the way he feels because either he's going to go or he isn't going to go. So he should have just said now to sort of get it out of the way. I think that's the big mistake when someone public pushes it off and says, I don't want to answer this or talk about it. It lasts longer.
He may not be going because he's on a different team now. If he was with the Penguins, then it would be something.
That's true, but he could say that. Hey, I don't even know because of the schedule. Then we'll deal with it at that time. But to say nothing is never a good answer.
Well, but Mike's right though. It's his right not to say.
It is his right. I'm just saying it's not going to do him any good.
Yeah.
Well,
from a writer's perspective, being in the press box, the cardinal sin is you're neutral. You don't cheer for a team. Well, in terms of writing, I'm neutral. I'm just writing about hockey. No one cares about my political stance, except for me. So I've never been tempted to go political and talk about politics in my blog because I don't think the Maple Leaf fans care whether I'm liberal or conservative.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do it on my website because I don't think anybody cares.
Yeah.
Really simple.
It's about hockey.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The problem with all these protest stories now is that it's so complicated, and the sports writers were either incapable or were doing a poor job of communicating what's really happened. We really lost sight of what this was about and what it is about now. Originally, it was about a protest of equality, racial equality, but it has evolved or devolved, depending on your perspective, into a anti-Trump, protest. Now, complicating all this is there's nothing more American than protesting.
Yeah.
There's nothing more American than protesting. I mean, our country was founded on the protest of what the perceived, what was happening, that England was doing, to the colonies. That's what it was based on. And right now, I mean, I consider it, as I watched, I'm sort of amused by this as I'm watching the unbelievably well done Burns Vietnam documentary.
Oh my God, yeah.
And of course, central to that is the protesting.
Isn't that amazing when you're watching that documentary, how fit it is to the times we're in right now?
Well, absolutely. And the war, and my argument on this, and I've said this to kids, and I think everybody my age understands this, but if not for the protests of that era, we would not all agree that that war was a disaster. Like we would not probably know that, or not to the extent we do. I mean, it was the protest that sort of brought everyone together behind the idea of, wow, why are we over there? And boy, do we need to get out of that. I mean, it was necessary in the history of this country. So, and the civil rights movement, of course, is also one that was founded on protest, and really, it created, some help for what was going on, but it certainly didn't go far enough, or we wouldn't be in where we're at now and all this. But anyway, because of all this now, it's put athletes in the position where I would guess that 90% of them would be like Ron Hainsey. They would rather not say what their political views.
Ironically, Kevin, the one Pittsburgh Steeler who did come out of the locker room, it was an offensive lineman who was a former Villanueva. Yeah. His, not that this really means anything, but his jersey is like the #1 selling jersey on the NFL website.
It means everything, because how did we get to the point where he was the one who had to apologize?
Right.
Because he came out, and this is the other complication of this whole mess, is that sports involves a team concept, like especially in hockey. The crest on the front and not the name on the back. How often do we hear that? It's like sticking together. It's not standing out. It's all of those things. Yeah. So when someone protests, it goes against everything that is hockey. And in terms of he basically had to apologize because he's a former Ranger that couldn't bring himself not to stand for the. For the anthem, which that's wrong as well.
That is wrong as well, and the whole, I mean, because the anthem is not what we're talking about here, and the whole this is just
not anymore. Yeah, I mean, that's the other issue, and the point I was trying to make is it's sort of evolved into. I will never believe that the here in Michigan we had the head of the Michigan State Police make a disparaging comment about NFL players. On Facebook, and now there's a big fear over that. And basically, she has taken that if you don't stand for the anthem, you're basically going against the military, not standing up for America. And I don't think this is that at all. I mean, you never convinced me that football players are anti-American. I think they're the ones that are kneeling. Support what the American servicemen, and I just think that they're trying to make a point. So,
but Kevin, I think the end result of this is going to be with the NFL and the NBA being so PR savvy, and this being maybe an issue that they really don't want to go down that road or continue to go down that road. I'm starting to get the feeling that we're going to have the national anthem done before the players even come out of the locker room, that they'll be done before 1 o'clock on Sunday for the crowd, and maybe there'll be a military honor guard there, but the players will not be out there, because all the players being out there does is give them a platform for their political agenda, left or right, and they don't want to go down that road.
Yeah, no. You may be right. There's going to be the anthem, because you couldn't take the anthem out because the backlash would be incredible. So there will be an anthem, but we may see that. We may see, that when the players go back in after they warm up, suddenly we'll see the honor guard. And if I were to guess, they'll make it grander than they've ever made it before. Just to make sure that they know that the team supports the flag and the anthem. Right. But you may be right. They may stay in the dressing room. But it does. I know I've talked to a couple of athletes about it. I was covering the NFL game on Sunday when we had 8 Detroit Lions and 2 Atlanta Falcons, and I was fascinated.
By the way, I think that was a touchdown, but go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, it probably was. But anyway, I was just struck by how they felt about it, and you know what? It really didn't have anything to do whether or not they love their country or what their thoughts about the men in service. It had everything to do with what was going on with Donald Trump, interfering and saying what he said and calling, people who protest, SOBs. It had everything to do with that.
Yeah, terrible. All right, well, thanks. I appreciate your input. We're going to keep our things where we are now. We will go through this. And of course, we'll discuss it more because I don't think it's over at all. But we're going to try to keep it off of Hockey Buzz and let Hockey Buzz be a place where you can go and read about sports as long as we possibly can. We'll see what happens there. All right, so real quick rumor before we start the 2 previews. The Golden Knights, who played last night and looked pretty good. They've looked pretty good in the preseason in general. It's preseason, of course, but they've been competitive. They have a ton of defensemen. A lot of people out there looking for defensemen. Really feels like McPhee, who usually doesn't admit to anything, comes out and says we'll probably have to do something. They just started returning calls to clubs yesterday that expressed some interest in obtaining a defenseman. That's a lot for McPhee to say publicly. That's about as much as going out there and putting a memo to the league saying we're willing to trade a defenseman.
Well, they essentially have to trade defensemen, like no getting around it because they don't have enough room on their roster. So
yeah, it's just drumming up business, basically.
Yeah. So they've got 5 pending UFAs on defense in Garrison's, Lucas Spiza, Stone, McNabb, and Engelland. And then they have on top of that, they have others who are going to be RFAs. Actually, Engelland's going to be an RFA, right?
Yeah, but Engelland, no. Engelland will not be an RFA. He's
UFA, right?
He's not going anywhere anyhow because he has a job in the organization next year. So he's
right. They've got Merrill, Miller, and Theodore, right? As well. So
yeah, Clayton, Stoner, Braden McNabb, Derek Engelland, Garrison, and Spiza are all UFA. James Neal, Perron, and Marchessault are all UFA as forwards.
Right, for forwards. I mean, they're going to be a very interesting team at trade deadline for sure, right? There's no question that they've got a lot of potential rental players there.
I guess the bugaboo for them is, had they not had a shared affiliation, all these guys could have been sent down to the AHL, but they have a shared affiliation, so they have a limited roster down there.
Well, the thing is that the defensemen that other teams would – I mean, there will be teams out there that want defensemen as rentals, obviously. That'll be closer to the deadline. So a guy like Spiza or Garrison, if they take a haircut on the salary, they'll be able to move them. But the defensemen that teams want right now are the defensemen they want to keep. Nate Schmidt or Shea Theodore. Those are the guys they want to potentially build around. Right. But those are the defensemen that other teams want.
But why give him anything? He has to waive them. He is in a horrible spot to trade to get any assets because really, like Mike said, these are not the best guys. And if you're getting one of these guys, you're literally getting them as your 8th. And why am I giving up an asset for that when I know he's going to have to waive them?
Yeah, no, that could be.
Yeah, I think that's where it's at. But I could see one of these guys going, and this was brought up to me by a source I talked to who said you could see one of these guys going to a team like Buffalo or Montreal, giving them a little more depth on defense and perhaps giving them the ability to make a move for Duchesne, somewhere down the line. That defensive depth which is needed to move for Duchesne is a big deal. So
Montreal, I could see after watching them on Monday. I mean, right now they're playing a 19-year-old and Victor Mete as the defense partner for Shea Weber, right. And that's not going to work. I mean, they have Alzner, they have Petrie, they have some players, but I mean they're definitely lacking in speed on the blue line after getting rid of Beaulieu, after getting rid of Subban. Markov was never a quick skater, but there's something lacking there. And that team is going to have a tough time scoring, and they need to generate offense from the back end. I don't think Mark Streit's going to help them do it.
No, exactly. So we'll see. We'll see what plays out here, but I think it's going to be a fun one for sure as we get along. So let's move to our teams. We're going to talk about St. Louis today, and we'll start with St. Louis, then we're going to get into Tampa. These are 2 teams that I kind of put together in a lot of ways because of the skill they have. We talked a little bit about Dallas and Tampa as well. A lot of people seem to be on the Dallas and Tampa bandwagon. Those are the 2 teams that you have to watch out for. But as far as St. Louis goes, we talked a little bit about them yesterday, possibly being in on the Duchesne deal because of the fact that they've got so many injuries now and they need to make something happen. They've got a lot of guys out again. Their depth chart is kind of fascinating. They've got, their top line of Schwartz, Stastny, and Tarasenko, if they play together, is as good as any top line in the NHL. Just, and I think Stastny is one of those guys who, he's such a smart hockey player and keeps going strong, but is always sort of underrated and has bad years, has good years. It's always hard to predict what's going to come out of Paul Stastny from year to year. I mean, the pickup of Braden Shen was huge for them, especially now with all the injuries. It turned out to be very important for them. But this is a team that finished third in their division last year, and that's with a very strong record. I mean, 46-29-7. That's a good record to finish third on, and they were 17. They scored 17 more goals than they allowed. Their defense is still solid despite losing Shattenkirk. They obviously have a really I think Colton Parenko is a guy who's a flat out superstar, and if he doesn't come out this year as one of the best top 5 defensemen, he's going to be a guy who's going to eventually be in the running for the Norris Trophy. And then Jake Allen and Carter Hutton, my favorite backup goalie in the NHL. So, thoughts on St. Louis moving into this year, Kevin? Where are they?
Well, the problem is they're where they were last year, and this Central Division is so tough that it's no guarantee they're even going to make the playoffs, and that's not an indictment of their roster, but that Central is so tough. But I really loved the Braden Shen pickup. I thought they needed a few more goals, and because of the injuries, they still may need a few more goals. But the defense with Pietrangelo and Parayko and Boomeister, that's a really, really good top 3. And I think, as with a lot of teams, but particularly in this division, it's really going to come down to Jake Allen. Like, if he plays as well as he did late in the season after the coaching change, they're going to be terrific.
Yeah.
If he's just average or not quite the same, then they'll be fighting it out, trying to grab one of those the 3rd or 4th spot, much like last year. But they're not a great team, but they're well above average. That's for sure.
Well, I'll leave the talk of Barbashev and Kostin to Russ because he knows a lot more about them. But I mean, I agree with Kevin that Jake Allen, when he was average, they were in trouble last year, and then late in the season he played wonderfully. So, their fortunes are heavily reliant on him. Boomeister is going to be out at least the first 3 weeks of the regular season with this injury that occurred last week. I haven't heard any more of any details on how much longer after that. But with Shattenkirk, there, you were down to 3, and you still could survive on, without one of those defenders. Right. Now with just Pietrangelo and Parayko, you're talking about Gunnarsson and Robert Bortuzzo and Edmonds. It's not as deep as it was. So, and you put that along with the injuries that they have, Steen and Fabry and Berglund. It's, you're really taking a chunk out of the core of that team, and if those guys are out way too long, sort of similar to Ottawa with Carlson, if you're playing shorthanded the first 6 weeks of the season, you could fall behind and then you never catch up. Yeah. Now they do have some young guys, and if they come through, then they have a chance because those young guys will probably get an
surgery issue, and here he is collecting. Look at me.
Yep. That was me.
Okay, go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I'll tell you. First on defense, I think they could get a nice boost out of Jake Wallman, putting him on the 3rd pairing. He started Providence. I think he's a lot better than people know of him about.
Yeah.
Really solid defensively, but really great offensively. Just moving the puck and stuff. He's not going to get power play time this year. But he can really help them on defense. Now, Klim Kostin, he's gone out there and he's scoring goals. He's hitting guys. I'm pretty sure he's getting the 9 games, and then they'll sort of see what happens injury-wise, where he fits in. They'll put him in some games. But I think he's earned the right to get the 9 games. He's looked good. The addition of Vladimir Sobotka this past offseason will help them tremendously. That'll give them a lot of the, the grit that they sort of need at times to go along with a lot of these great scorers. And Barbashev, I think, will be fine. I think if you put him on that third line, he will not only be another guy that isn't afraid to hit a guy, but can score goals. So I like everything on this team except the starting goalie. I'm not a Jake Allen fan. I think he's okay. I think Jake Allen's good. I don't think he's great. I think St. Louis needs to be great to elevate Jake Allen, which is possible. Look, we've seen guys win Stanley Cups with lesser goalies. So they're in the mix. They play in one of the places where you could literally be out in the first round or somehow make it to the conference finals, but they'll be in the mix.
And depending on how successful they are, if they, worst case scenario, if they drop out of the playoff race, or if they fall behind, when you get close to the deadline, a guy like Paul Stastny will be a rental that could bring back a lot because he's a UFA at the end of the year. They'd probably have to eat some of the salary, but he still has something left in the tank that could help another team if they go that direction.
Yeah. They have a lot of players that they didn't draft on their roster. I was trying to find something unique about them. Got a lot more players than you'd expect. Through these picked up mainly through trades, and free agent signings. I mean, both of them. They have drafted players, but a lot of them aren't here. They don't have a ton of first rounders. They have some, but not as many as other teams we've seen. And of course, the big thing is they're the crazy inactive list right now, which is 4 first rounders that two they drafted, 2 they traded for in Fabry, Berglund, Steen, and Bouwmeester. Those are 4 significant. And Sanford is also a player for them. So, that's 5 players right there that I think most people would have expected.
If you want to see the Blues in the Stanley Cup, they need to flip flop what happened with Chicago last year, and they need to win that division. Right,
they do. They get to the top of that division and then play somebody from the Pacific.
Yeah,
which I think is a very big deal. Get a chance to play somebody, or perhaps you play somebody from their division. Still, who knows how many teams are going to make it in from the Central? But the Pacific has also gotten a lot better too. So
yeah,
it's about the Western Conference is really up for grabs. So as a playoff, do you see them as a playoff team? I don't.
I do.
I don't.
Wow.
And I know people are going to think I'm crazy about that, but I don't see them as a playoff team this year. I am also not a huge fan of the goalie either. Russ, I'm with you on that one. Jake Allen is good when he's good. He tends to be streaky, and I don't really trust him in a playoff series that much. And I really think Carter Hutton's a great backup, so I think they're set there. But Jake Allen is one guy so I think that my surprises this year, when we actually pick the teams, I'm going to tell you that I think Winnipeg's going to make it and St. Louis isn't. So that's my thought. Kevin?
Well, yeah, I've got them out too, and I think there could be 4 teams from the Pacific making it.
Wow.
So if you think Dallas is going to make it,
yep,
you gotta knock one out. And I love Winnipeg. I mean, the Jets, I'm so bullish on them. I just don't know whether their goaltending is going to be good enough. I guess it comes out, much like St. Louis, is will Mason do the job in Winnipeg? Because we love their offense. I think their defense is still a work in progress, but. I've got the Blues out.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, I have them as a wild card, but I agree. I think they're out. And not just because of the injuries at the beginning of the year. Just I don't know. They're a very hot or cold team. When they're hot, they're very, very tough to beat, and they're getting good goaltending. But those instances were not that consistent last year. So I think in the end they're going to probably fall a few points short.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of those teams that there's probably like 4 or 5 of them that you could say could either win a Stanley Cup or not make the playoffs. Like this, like that.
I completely agree. I think this year's picking the teams is, maybe I say this every year, but I don't remember saying this last year. But boy, it's been hard this year.
It feels like it's been easy in the Western Conference for a while until now. But the Eastern Conference has always been a little tricky to me. But this conference specifically, couldn't agree more. All right, let's move over to Tampa, a team that most people have making the playoffs and going pretty far. Yet a team that did not even make the playoffs last year due to injuries, because Tampa last year finished 42-30-10, so still 2 games over real 500 with a +7, but did just fall out of the playoffs by a single point to the Toronto Maple Leafs right at the end of the season there. Of course, they did it without Stamkos last year, and that was a big deal. Injuries have killed them, but this team is back. And loaded for bear. I mean, they've got a lot of players, a lot of great players. The obvious trade of Drouin could take a little bit away from their offense if if they face injuries again. That's where they had the depth. But Duran helped a ton. But otherwise, they're pretty solid on the offense, and defensively, I think they're pretty solid as well. Although I think they're overrated defensively right now after their top pairing. But that's my opinion. I do like Vasilevsky though a lot. I think he's right there with Matt Murray, in my opinion, is two of the best goalies in the NHL, and two of the goalies who are under 25 years old, which is rare in the NHL right now. So let's start again with you, Kevin. Thoughts on Tampa?
Well, I see Tampa as a playoff team, the division champion, and a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. I have no idea. I mean, obviously they were beat up last year, but that was a exceptional team last year, and they had injuries. I don't know that Vasilevsky was quite as good as they wanted him to be when he took over from Bishop. They were looking for a little more out of him. He was fine, but I think they were expecting him to be great. And then I'm going to disagree with you about the defense. Okay. I like adding Girardi to it. I think this is a classic case of a guy who, he bore the brunt of the criticism in New York for the way that the Rangers were performing. I mean, I think they saw him as too slow, but I think he fits pretty well with the Lightning. He won't be asked to do much more than block shots, which he's very good at. And, he'll be down the pairing a little bit. They've got Hedman and Strawman as the two most important defensemen. So, he plays more of a diminished role in Tampa, and I think he'll fit there. The guy that I really think is going to help that team is Kunitz, a proven winner, a guy that's great in the postseason, terrific in the dressing room. I think he just adds one more element. And this team was already good with the people. And Sergachev, the player they got in the Druin trade, I've talked to a number of scouts around the league that think, he's going to have an impact this season. And he's a highly skilled player. I think he's exactly the player that Steve Yzerman's been looking for the last, year and a half, looking for that good young defenseman to kind of move in and round out this defense. And, by the playoffs, I think he could be a real valuable asset.
And he's not the only young defenseman that they have. I mean, one of the things that's good about having Coburn and Girardi as veteran guys, they have a couple younger defensemen, not only Sergachev, but Jake Dotchin and Slater Cuckoo, who played a little bit in the NHL last year, played on a team that went to the Calder Cup conference final in Syracuse that I saw a lot of last year. So I think they're really deep on defense, and I think Hedman and Strawman is a fine top pairing. Vasilevsky, this is a team that got better after they dumped players at the deadline. They got rid of Boyle, they got rid of Filppula, and they played better. So, and they did it all year, almost all year without Stamkos. So you had kids like Braden Point step up late in the year, and I think he's going to be, he now with Stamkos back, if he's your third line center behind Stamkos and Johnson, that's a matchup problem that a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference are not going to be able to handle. So I think they're really deep. I think Vasilevsky can handle the number one goaltending job. If Stamkos stays healthy, I think they're winning the division. And right now, they're my team to go to the Cup final from the East.
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's a lot to like here. Obviously, I think Girardi as just a shot blocker is fine. I don't think he'll be horrible. I think the goaltending is excellent. I think the only problem that I could foresee with this team, and look, they've got guys in Syracuse like Adam Ern, like they're going to have guys they could bring up that have a lot of talent in case there's injuries. But with you got Kunitz and Callahan, those are two guys that have an injury history. And so that third line could be in flux a lot of the season for them. I'm not saying that's going to kill their season, but I'm saying it just could fool around with where they end up in the standings and what may be affecting their playoffs. They're an obvious playoff team, but I still think for them to sort of get back to where they were and get back to the conference finals, they probably need to be, if not at top of their division, pretty high up. And if they get in the injury bug again with some of these guys like Callahan, like let's say Kunitz, that could hurt them. It all depends, when they get hurt and when. But right now, they're a playoff team.
Yeah, I think. I think for sure. I think they're a playoff team too. I have this feeling though, when everybody is so high on them, that the pressure is there for them to not achieve. You know, like it's just for some reason get everybody back. And Cooper's such a great coach, but there have been chinks in that armor. You know, that feels like he's not. You can see things falling the wrong direction for Tampa again, but a lot has to happen. You know, so it's hard for me to put them into like, you know, where a lot of people are saying Stanley Cup team, best team in this division. I think they are the best team in the division, but still, they could go the other way. You know, like to me, it's possible that they could fall apart again, and I think that's the strange thing. They don't have enough to make me feel like that's impossible. That was a one and done situation. I'm not convinced.
Well, I mean, Cooper's out of excuses in the sense that they've brought back and re-signed all of his guys. They re-signed Johnson. They signed Killorn a couple years ago. They extended Palat. You know, they got rid of Durant, who was a problem child in the organization, an extremely talented player, but just didn't fit what Cooper's ideal of what he wants to do. So the excuses are over with. And if they make the playoffs and they make a decent playoff run, then I think he's fine. If they miss the playoffs again, then I think, you know, maybe not this year, but maybe next year his job could be in jeopardy.
I think if they miss the playoffs, he's gone. I mean, if they miss the playoffs this year, I don't think he can survive that. That's my opinion. I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs. I think they'll be fine. But if they did,
if they were to miss the playoffs, his job would be in trouble. I agree.
Yeah, I don't think they would give him another year on that, because there've been things going on for a couple of years now that've been kind of strange and odd. All right, before we get out of here today, I found this fun thing on Reddit. This guy who said his dad was staying at the New York hotel in Vegas, and last night, and got this letter which was just handed to all the people in there, and it basically said the puck's about to drop for the first professional team. They wanted to have, you know, shorten the letter up. They just said they have a special pregame fan feast party in the park starting at 4 p.m. Come participate, interactive games, stuff like that. And then if you're feeling lucky, come watch the game at our new hockey pit, featuring $5 blackjack. It's so hot, it'll melt the ice. That's what they said. So there you have it. First official, I think, you know, first.
Well, you haven't checked. Have we seen the strip club ad yet or not yet?
No.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the craps table right next to
Usually I would have now by Russ, by the way. Usually by now I would have seen all the strip club ads. Yeah, but this year, as of now, like I said, I've been in a lot of back pain, so no, I haven't seen anything lately.
I'm waiting for the craps tables right next to the hot dogs and nachos. That's what I'm waiting for. In the arena, I'm waiting for, here, roll a 7, give me some nachos. There you go.
I just love the hockey pit featuring $5 blackjack. I think that's like, but that the NHL has arrived in Las Vegas officially.
Nope, it definitely has.
That's all the time we have for today, guys. Remember we love your support in general, but we really love your support with your money. So if you have a chance to
$5 blackjack here on Hockey Buzz.
Right. You know, join the hockey pit on patreon.com/hockey. A site so hot it'll melt your ice if you wanted to. And we're there. So basically just go to patreon.com/hockey. You can support the site $1 a month, $5 a month. It all helps a ton more than you can imagine. And more of you are doing it all the time now. We really very much appreciate that. And if you like what we do and you get any value out of it at all, $5 a month. You know, if you think we're worth $5 a month, we appreciate that. Not many people do, but, you know, think we're like individually worth $5 a month, but some people do. If this show is worth $5 a month as a group, okay, there you go.
So that makes me worth like $1.50. But
$1.50. You know.
I'm worth $1.25 Canadian.
I mean, Kevin's worth a good $10 a month right there, but it's just three of us. I would get, you know, we're working somewhere between $4.50 and $5.10, somewhere in there. So yeah. All right. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Talk to you tomorrow.